is what flows in this fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to Dope Interviews, brought to you by the Mighty 19 Media Group. I'm your host, Warren Shaw, and in the virtual building today, I have their executive producers of Freaknik, the Wildest Party Never Told, Geraldine and P. Frank Williams. Geraldine, P, what's good? How y'all doing?
Hello.
Good, feeling great.
Appreciate you taking the time, and obviously you've been running through this conversation all day long. So I'll try to do some originality here, the best of my ability.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Of course. One of the things that I saw when that I didn't expect when watching the documentary was really going back to the genesis and talking to the folks who really started the entirety of the Freaknik situation. Mm-hmm. What did you all learn about that process, and how did you all get in contact with them? Were they eager to talk to y'all in producing this film?
Oh, wow. Well, no, I mean, I think with any story, you have to have an origin, right? It starts somewhere. And I think there's a mythology that this was just a street party in the 90s. And it's actually something more of these young black college students from, Morehouse and Spelman and AUC Center who wanted to have a picnic, and they wanted to do it on spring break. And it became something much bigger via word of mouth. So I think we really wanted to make sure that people saw more than just the party, you know what I mean? And how this was really born out of Black joy and, a need for a safe space for young African-American students.
Yeah. How do you feel the film did in terms of capturing that essence, if you will, the Black cultural experience specifically for that in terms of music, fashion, and the social dynamics that were in play at that time?
No, I mean, I think that we tried our best to try to go through all of that. I mean, it's a pretty jam-packed film for just 90 minutes. We talk about the hair, the clothes, the politics, the race, you know what I mean? The fashion, the cars even, you know what I mean? And so it was really important that Freaknik wasn't just the party, but it was a cultural phenomenon and a cultural movement. And by the way, 40 years of Freaknik last year. This now has become 41. So this is not something that was easy to do, put 40 plus years of history in a film.
No, well, no, for sure. You guys did an amazing job, I think, with that too. I think, looking in, I was like, oh man, whose auntie, grandmas are going to be feeling some type of way about that. And I guess the question I have for you both here now is, getting the footage from actual people, or how did you kind of accumulate that to integrate that into the story that you're trying to tell?
I think so much of, Freaknik was people getting together. And so part of it was finding people that are in the community, that are on the ground, who knew people. Oh, I went to Freaknik. My friend went to Freaknik. Who do you know that went to Freaknik? And really that word of mouth, the same way Freaknik grew by word of mouth, we were gathering footage by word of mouth. And that really was helpful for us. And then obviously utilizing Jermaine Dupri and Uncle Luke to put the word out there helped. Once the announcement that we were making a documentary about Freaknik happened, a lot of folks even reached out to us personally and said, hey, we have pictures, we have footage. So the next challenge was getting it out from the boxes in their garage, digitizing it, and screening hundreds of hours of footage to find what we needed and what hadn't been seen before.
You just mentioned Uncle Luke there, and I know a lot. The film touches on his role, I guess specifically in '93, and it's really interesting, right? Because I think when you watch it, you understand that it wasn't meant to be freaky, but he put his touch on it, especially from the way that he was vibing back in those days. Now, I want to get into something here a little bit too, but I know he didn't intend any harm, right? Personally, as an individual and as an artist, or whatever the case may be. But do you think there's anything that kind of while Freaknik maybe went off a little bit too far left as a result of maybe bringing that freaky aspect to it, at that time in '93?
I think, part of it is also that society, all of this exists in society, negative things, sexual assault, sexualization of women. And so I think you can't put the onus on one person and their music to say that this caused it. And so I think what was interesting as well is that some of the women felt like Luke's music was finally an opportunity for them to express themselves and their sexuality, which was interesting to hear at that time, right? In the 80s and 90s, particularly in the 90s with Luke and his music coming out. So to hear that from women themselves that felt like they loved to hear that music, and finally they got an opportunity and felt like they could really be free in that moment was a fresh take. So
Yeah, and that's displayed, I think, in some of even the people that talk about it, some of the women specifically, right? And there's this mantra, if you will, of the objectification that happens kind of in some of these events and things of that nature. So how do you feel you just kind of like balance that, right? By telling, hey, what really happened, but as you alluded to, well, no, some people are like, hey, that's not what we were trying to get at, but this was just an unintended result. How do you think you found the balance of displaying what was some ways objectification, but understanding that, hey, that wasn't the intent of the show itself, sorry, of the event itself?
Yeah, I think part of it is talking to people that had different experiences at the event, right? You had people that felt liberated, but then you also had women like Stacy who were sexually assaulted, and women who felt objectified and didn't feel safe. And so it's important to talk about these different experiences in the same breath, because that is the culture that we live in. That is the society that we live in. And all of this can exist in the same time, in the same place. So it was important for us to include all of these different experiences to show that these things did happen at Freaknik, but also it wasn't exclusive to just Freaknik.
Yeah, well said, well said. And I think interestingly enough, what's old becomes new again, I think, in a lot of ways. And so I actually live in the South Florida area, and I don't know if you've seen the news or whatever the case may be, but the mayor in the city was more or less like, oh, we're not breaking up with spring break, if you will. And obviously a lot of Black spring breakers come to South Florida to party, so to speak. So it's really interesting. Like, do you see the parallels in that? And it's like, it's so crazy to kind of think, hey, 40 years later or whatever the case may be, we're still kind of fighting the same things.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, that a lot of some of the themes, Black political situations, police brutality, the city not being able to accommodate sort of Black events, which you just mentioned, like the spring break. And, it's unfortunate that sometimes what is old is still new. And we obviously paralleled that in the film and shown that. And, you could see sort of even how like the spring break stuff, like Daytona and all of that back in the day was treated versus the Freaknik kids who, they bought out the horses and the cavalry as if there was a riot, and they don't usually do that to other kids of other races.
In watching the documentary towards the end, so it's interesting because I think P, you had just mentioned, it's like, 40 years later and it's still kind of going. I got the sense that maybe not everybody was excited that it's reinvented and it's obviously not going to be the same thing and it can't be the same thing. What is both of y'all's sense of that, if you will, like say, hey, it's restarted here, I guess, as of 2020 or 2021, the new version of Freaknik. So yeah, so your thoughts on the perception of the revised version of it, right? I think I watched the film and some of the people interviewed, it seemed like, Freaknik could never be the same. And it was like, well, it probably shouldn't. So it's just like,
well, I mean, I
like,
think it's a time capsule, right? It's you can't go back in time. It's like a relationship. You can't change what happened, and you can't change. The 90s was a totally different time in the country, and as well as the 80s. And so I think that some of those things that were happening in the country and the world don't happen today. Obviously, some of the safety issues, some of the kind of like Freaknik was all over the whole city of Atlanta. Imagine somewhere, spring break is usually just in South Beach, but imagine if it was all over Miami. That would be kind of wild. So I just think that was a different era and a different time. And I don't personally think you could bring back the old version of Freaknik. 21 has created his own version. There have been some concerts, but I think that part of Freaknik, you have to leave it alone.
I think it's also part of the nostalgia too, right? People are enamored with the idea of it, and sometimes it's a very specific scope of what they're looking for. So they don't want it for everything that it was, but just these specific parts of it. And maybe those are the things that you can pull and integrate into events nowadays. But like P. Frank said, it will never be as it was at Freaknik because we're in a different time.
Yeah, I hear you. Again, it was really surreal to watch some of it, some guys that I know, or the case would be. And it was like, you could see they were living vicariously just through the moments and the conversation. And I think that was authentically brought out in the film. But as you alluded to, some things, hey, it had its time and now it's needed to at least change over into something different now to evolve with where we are here in 2024. I want to thank Geraldine and P. Frank for the time that you've given me here today. Be sure to catch Freaknik, The Wildest Party Never Told on Hulu. I'm Warren Shaw on Dope Interviews. Thank y'all. Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Peace.
Together we stand, divided we never. The vision is one, striving for the better. Working as a team, working toward a dream. It's not even work when the team is the dream. On a united front, we got our own back. A band of brothers to counteract any attack. One heart in fact, Forget what the blood say. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. So let's do it for the love, give to the max. Listen to opinion, but react to facts. And remember that together with a but separate, just pieces of it. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA.
Family represent like a tree with names on it. We're free, no chains on it. Relieved, the pain's gone, I can see. We come together like questions on the quiz. Mojo Flow and Viz, man, you know what it is. And if ignorance is bliss, you're gonna hate this lesson. Organized intellect like a tropical depression. My symbol is the cross, a mic and ghost peppers. Cause I'm just a black sheep growing up to be a shepherd. Moonlighting as a weapon to protect the children. Every brother is a father, dynasties we're building. Max, J and K, Bay, and Isaiah, next level of the family foundation. Understand me?